But we do begin this morning with the war in Ukraine as we quickly approach that one-year mark, and a tale of two speeches now from two of the world's most powerful countries.
President Biden is in Poland today, one day after that surprising and unprecedented visit to Ukraine, a country that's in the middle of a war. Later this morning, the president will make a landmark speech ahead of the war's one-year anniversary, following talks with members of NATO's eastern flank. And earlier this morning in Moscow, President Putin delivered his State of the Nation address. In a bullish speech, Putin accused the West of provoking the conflict and threatening Russia's very existence, allegations the West strongly denies.
The
Western elites do not conceal their goals. As they say, it's a direct quote, to bring Russia a strategic defeat. What does it mean? What is it for us? It means to end us once and for all. It means they plan to turn a local conflict into a global confrontation. We understand it exactly like that. We will react to it accordingly. This is because, in this case, it is about the very existence of our country.
NBC News foreign correspondent Josh Letterman joins us now from Warsaw, Poland. Josh, before we get more into President Putin's speech, let's focus on where you are in Poland and President Biden's agenda there today. What do we expect to be the big message he delivers today, especially in the wake of that visit to Kyiv?
Well, Joe, it was almost 1 year ago that President Biden was at the Royal Gardens here in Poland, where he delivered a speech just as that war was getting underway, trying to make the case that the U.S., its allies, and Ukraine needed to stand together against Russia's aggression. And here, 1 year later, White House officials say President Biden will try to expand and build on that message, making the point that the Western coalition really has succeeded in holding itself together, in supporting Ukraine, in being able to withstand a Russian war that many had suspected would lead Ukraine's military to quickly collapse. President Biden trying to send the message as he meets here in Poland with President Duda and tomorrow with leaders from other NATO countries on the eastern flank, that it is more important than ever that countries step up with more weapons, with more economic assistance, and with more diplomatic solidarity with Ukraine to ensure that Russia is not able to use this long-running war and that sense of fatigue to gain an upper hand over Ukraine.
Let's talk more about President Putin's speech. We heard him just announce, this is a big headline, Russia suspending its involvement in the new START nuclear weapons treaty. He also claimed the West provoked the war, something Western leaders would strongly disagree with. What else did he say? Did we learn anything new about his plans now going into the second year of this war?
Well, he didn't offer a lot of new details about his strategy other than to say Russia plans to continue to try to achieve its objectives in Ukraine. But this was a significant announcement in terms of ending, at least for now, Russia's participation in the new START treaty, the last remaining arms agreement between the United States and Russia. And it wasn't totally surprising in that Russia had already stopped allowing the U.S. to inspect its sites, its military sites under that agreement, first during COVID and then citing the war in Ukraine. But it's really a sign of just how much relations between the U.S. and Russia have deteriorated since the start of this war. President Putin using that address to say it is the fault of the West and the U.S. that this war is taking place, not Russia's. Take a listen.
Responsibility for fomenting the Ukrainian conflict, for its escalation, and for the increasing number of victims lies entirely with the Western elites, and of course the current regime in Kyiv, for which the Ukrainian people are essentially strangers.
We heard Putin once again talking about the history of Ukraine's relationship with Russia, trying to make the case that it is Russia's responsibility to protect and defend Russian speakers in Ukraine, and that Russia simply came to the aid of its own people in Ukraine who needed their help. That, of course, is a historical narrative that the U.S. says is completely bogus.
And Josh, real quickly, I have to ask you, that extraordinary visit by President Biden to Kyiv yesterday, how'd the White House pull that off?
They pulled it off, first of all, by keeping it limited to a very small handful of officials who even knew the president was leaving. He slipped out of Washington under cover of darkness at about 4 a.m., flying to Poland, then taking about a 10-hour train ride into Kyiv. The White House says that they, in fact, informed Russia ahead of time that President Biden was going to be in Kyiv because they didn't want to risk any possibility that Russia would do anything while President Biden was on the ground there that could risk his safety, Joe.
All right, Josh Letterman, another busy day in Eastern Europe. Thanks so much, Josh.
Well, prayers and well wishes continue to pour in for former President Jimmy Carter. This after the Carter Foundation announced over the weekend that the 98-year-old has entered hospice care at his home. NBC News senior White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell has the latest from Plains, Georgia.
President's Day has a special poignancy in Plains, Georgia, where decades of community pride embraces a favorite son.
It's a good opportunity to say, you know, we recognize what you've done for our country. We thank you for that.
Bill Clinton noted this holiday to send good wishes to Jimmy Carter, the 39th president, who returned home to this house here in Plains to spend his remaining days in hospice care, close to Rosalind, his wife of 76 years.
Do you feel this personally?
Oh, definitely.
He deserves to know, he should know what he meant to people and what he will always mean to people and represent to this country.
Secure in his faith and his place in history. At 98, Jimmy Carter has lived longer than any American president. He reflected on facing his final days after surviving brain cancer in 2015.
I've had a wonderful life. I've had thousands of friends, and I've had an exciting and adventurous and gratifying existence.
The Carter Center and his local church are posting messages and memories from the public. Habitat for Humanity honored his nearly 4 decades of sweat and spirit by wishing him comfort and well-being.
By choosing hospice, the former president can still receive care to keep him comfortable, but not medical intervention that would prolong his life.
All right, Kelly O'Donnell, thanks so much.
The Supreme Court is set to hear 2 cases this week that could potentially shape the future of internet content and how it's moderated. At stake is whether social media and tech companies can be held liable for certain recommendations to their users.
Yeah, for more on what we can expect, let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos. We're also joined by CNBC contributor and Wall Street Journal reporter Tim Higgins. Good morning to you both. Thanks for being here. Danny, let's start with you. This case, Google versus Gonzalez. A lot of interest in this one. It stems from the 2015 ISIS attack in Paris. We know that this college student there, Noemi Gonzalez, her parents making this argument against Google. What do we know about this case?
The family has sued YouTube or Google. These are companion cases. Gonzalez v. Google, and another one against Twitter. And they have somewhat different goals, but very similar facts. For example, in the YouTube case, the plaintiffs are saying essentially that YouTube aided and abetted terrorism by its recommendation algorithm. You know, when you go on YouTube and you watch stuff, it recommends new things and it automatically plays them when your video ends. So the plaintiffs are arguing in that case that by making those recommendations, Google is aiding and abetting terrorism. Or excuse me, well, Google and YouTube, they're essentially the same. YouTube is arguing, no, it's just an algorithm. And as long as we treat all people the same, we're not specially recommending things to terrorists, then we should be in the clear. The Twitter case is interesting only because the Ninth Circuit in the case below found for the families, not that they win, but that their case can go forward. So you have somewhat different outcomes at the lower courts because YouTube has won in the Gonzalez case at every level. So it'll be interesting what the Supreme Court does with this kind of split in the cases below.
Tim, let's bring you into this conversation. The tech industry has been criticized for not doing enough to remove harmful material from the internet. Can you give us more insight into how companies right now are shielded under the Communications Decency Act?
Yeah, this goes back more than 25 years. And essentially, Congress was deciding how the internet would operate. Would it be like a newspaper or a television station that can be held liable for defamation or other legal issues? Or is it going to be more like a town square where voices can go and be heard and the town square is not going to get sued? Essentially, it would be like if I was on the phone and I was defaming you, you're not going to be able to sue AT&T. And so that's kind of the way Congress went, that this is a town square, and really the foundation for what we have now with Facebook and Twitter and all these social media companies. What's changed, however, is the business model. These companies are so sophisticated now at targeting that information to you that now the question is the algorithm that's generating this content to you, is that protected as well? So really a key kind of going forward, because if this was to be struck down or narrowed in some way, it could be very expensive, very costly, time-consuming for these companies to kind of redo how they kind of put third-party content out to the world.
Have to reinvent the wheel, it sounds like. So, Danny, we know Twitter's getting a lot of attention lately, including this case coming up on Wednesday. What else do we know about it and how it differs from the one with Google?
Interestingly enough, even the parties seem to agree that factually these cases are nearly identical. But in the Twitter case, the family suing Twitter is basically generally alleging that Twitter aided and abetted terrorism under federal anti-terrorism laws, which allows the family to sue in court and get triple damages even. So that case is moving forward. Doesn't mean they win. The difference between the YouTube cases, that's about the algorithm. There's a more concrete thing there that the plaintiffs are alleging is assisting terrorism, in that it recommends things to terrorists to watch to help them. Not necessarily either plaintiffs are going to win, but this is about whether their cases move forward. And I'll take an even darker view. If the court comes down on the side of the families in both of these cases, it could change the internet the way we know it, because what internet provider, what platform in their right mind would allow anyone's user-generated content if they know they may be liable down the road for terrorism?
So we would expect that decision from the Supreme Court by the end of June. Tim, what are the ramifications of this decision? Danny just suggested what they could be. I mean, how will this case potentially shape the future of the internet?
Yeah, Microsoft a warning in one of its filings that inevitably these platforms are going to allow less information from third parties out on these sites just because of the potential liability there. The other concern here is kind of the litigation that these companies would face going into the future. You can imagine all of the content on there, what would potentially generate a lawsuit. Not that they would win it, but the kind of the time consume of all of that. And just, the idea that these platforms would not allow for the same kind of creativity that you see there now. So, the concerns there are that essentially they would change how these platforms operate on the day-to-day.
Wow, some potential ramifications here. Definitely something to watch. Danny and Tim, thank you.
Later today, the Ohio Department of Health is expected to open a clinic at a church in East Palestine. It would care for anyone who has been sick since a train derailed there more than 2 weeks ago, sending toxic fumes into the air. NBC News correspondent George Solis is there with the latest.
Residents say over the last 3 weeks, they've seen a lot of movement in their town from local leaders, politicians. But the reality is they just want assurances that their air and water are safe. More anger mounting in East Palestine.
We're so far out and we still don't have answers.
Shelby Walker's home is near the toxic train derailment site.
We have no choice to live here right now.
Walker says just days after the derailment, she started feeling sick.
I have lost my sense of smell and taste since then, some respiratory issues.
She says she's tested negative for COVID and that her doctor was unable to explain her symptoms. Ongoing EPA testing of the air and water has not yet shown a threat to the community, according to the agency. Still, some residents say they aren't convinced.
I'm very frustrated.
We don't think they're taking care of all the pollution that they should be.
U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg urging Norfolk Southern and other rail companies to drop previous resistance to certain regulations the agency says would improve safety on America's rails. In a strongly worded letter to CEO Alan Shaw, Buttigieg says the people of East Palestine cannot be forgotten, nor can their pain be simply considered the cost of doing business. Shaw making an unannounced visit this weekend to East Palestine. Norfolk Southern says it's paid out more than $2.6 million to residents and business owners for their losses. But Walker says the damage is done. You want answers?
I'm not here to put blame. It was an accident. It was a horrible, horrible accident. But I do blame for them not saying, hey, this is what we need to do.
Our thanks to George Solis. And in addition to that health clinic opening today, the head of the EPA is expected to be in town to address health concerns and provide an update on the federal response.
All right, turning now to a check of your weather this morning.
And meteorologist Angie Lassman joins us now with the latest on a winter weather system that's headed for the west. Angie, good morning.
The west and beyond, guys, good morning. We're going to see many people impacted by this same storm system over the coming days. And you can see these alerts, the winter ones, are already up for 35 million people, extending from the west coast all the way into the Midwest for places like Michigan to California and up the west coast. This is what we're going to be expecting as far as we get through the next couple of days. Some snow, some difficult travel when we add in some strong winds as well, and even some severe weather on the southern side of this and some icing as well. So we've really got a mixed bag of a lot of things to deal with. Here's how it plays out. Your future tracker showing you that system that dives down from Canada. It does bring places like the northern Rockies some snow through the day today. We'll see that working in, and the gusty winds as well. I'll show you exactly how high those winds could get here in a moment. But notice how it spreads across the northern tier of the country as well. So places like the high plains and into the Midwest could see some snow. We'll talk about the totals in a moment, but also notice this wintry mix, the freezing rain that we'll deal with that will allow for some accumulating ice, as well as some rain that's stretched down through parts of the Tennessee Valley as well. Some thunderstorms will be impacting folks there too. There's a secondary push of some of that snow that works through the Midwest, and eventually by the time we get later into the week, say Thursday and into the early parts of Friday, we could see some of this snow impacting folks for the interior areas of the Northeast. So let's talk about the accumulation amounts first. Here's the latest. We could see maybe up to a foot for Salt Lake City, over a foot for Rapid City. But check out these numbers from Minneapolis. Really a substantial snowfall expected. Over 2 feet is possible here as we get through Thursday. So again, you add in some of those winds that we'll expect, and travel will be really difficult. When it comes to the Northeast, we're looking at about an inch for Boston. The interior areas like Burlington could see up to 9 inches. So not quite as much, still causing some issues over the next couple of days. Here's those wind alerts. 63 million people are included in this, mostly focused towards the west of the United States. But look at these gusts, 60 miles per hour is as high as we could see them. That likely will cause some power outages, some downed trees, blowing snow. This is why the travel over the next few days is going to be a little iffy. Now, on the flip side of that, it feels like summer in some spots. 86 degrees, guys, today in Dallas. It's going to be more than 20, even 30 degrees warmer than normal in a lot of places. It's not just today, even tomorrow. Cincinnati in the low 70s, St. Louis in the low 70s, Atlanta, you're going to hit 78 degrees. And it was a gorgeous day yesterday in New York, and these temperatures are going to still be fairly mild even through Thursday. Philadelphia hits 71 degrees. By Friday, it drops to 48, and Saturday, we're at 37. So it's a little bit of weather whiplash, but we could see more than 100 cities break some record highs. There's potential for record-breaking highs in a lot of places over the next few days. So really a mixed bag out there, if you will.
I love seeing Richmond go from 83 to the 40s in like less than 3 days.
Yeah, it's incredible. And there's some severe weather with that system, so lots to track.
All right. Thanks, Angie. Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.